one couple that came into our life a while back, and I sat down and talked with them about an issue that they told me was the issue. And we sit down and we talk for a few minutes, and I look at this young lady who's about 31 years old at the time. And I look at this young lady and I see, I'm like, I know what the deal is right here. I'm just going to go for it. We're going to deal with it. Let's just get it out here. I said, you want to get pregnant, don't you? Tears just start streaming down her face. This man made her promise before they got married that they wouldn't have any children. She had invested 7 years of her life into a relationship with this man, didn't want to go start over, so she said whatever she had to say in order to get the ring on her finger. And now 3 years later, she is aching on the inside. She wants a baby. Spent 4 months with this couple. And rather than give this woman a child, this man divorced her. And we'd sit down and I'd look him in his eye and I'd ask him, what are you thinking? Do you realize that she is yearning for what God created her to yearn for? Yeah, well, she promised. What's wrong with you, man? Don't you love this woman? Yeah, I do, but I know where you're going, and I just don't want to talk about that. What's too bad? I'm bigger than you are. We're going to talk about this. I mean, at one point, I just put my foot down, man. I gave him an ultimatum. I was like, listen, I want her knocked up in a month. I know where you live. Don't make me come get you. He wouldn't give her a child. They're divorced now. Folks, this is one of the primary purposes that God gave us marriage. The other purpose is this purpose of illustration. One is procreation, that we would bring children into this world and that we would raise them and that we train them in righteousness, train them in godliness, and send them forth into this world to exercise dominion over this world. The other is that our marriage would be a living, breathing, tangible expression of the relationship between Christ and his church.
So what do we do? Do we respond to the video first, or do we hit the questions?
Let's do the video, and then we can do the questions.
Cool.
So, initial thoughts, because I kind of saw this when I was prepping it.
Man, that man did not love his wife at all.
You don't think so?
Not at all. I mean, like...
Well, she promised.
Yeah, but, like, that's silly, man. Like, as you go through life, right, you grow and you begin to go through different things, and you kind of, come to realization that, things may change, right? Like, in one sense, I have a hard time understanding personally, just because I have one son, and it's hard for me to understand when I do hear people that they don't want to have children. But you
even before I had kids, I don't understand it.
But that's not the case, right? Like, not everybody is gonna be like that, and it is what it is at that point. But
dang, man, you're really struggling with the video. I could see that. It's tough, man, because...
It is very tough, because it's like, I think about, like, my son, right? Like, for me to think, like, I never want to have a kid. And then,
sometimes when you're dealing with them, you wish you didn't have them, but...
I know, yeah, right? But it's like, to think, like, I would never have the little guy. Like, that's just very difficult for me to say right now.
Yeah.
Do we know if the guy had any type of additional issues of the case? I mean, he doesn't go into it. We don't necessarily know. But I guess I just want us to be careful with this too, because there are people that aren't able to have children, right?
Yeah, but that's not his case.
His case is that he was completely selfish.
Yeah,
that's what that is. 100%.
By the way that he's expressing what's going on, I think that that it didn't seem like there was an actual excuse for him not wanting children, except for the fact that he just didn't want kids, right? Yeah. But the whole reason why I wanted to show this specific part of the clip is because it showcases that you need to be on the same page with the person that you're choosing to marry. Like this poor woman, her knowing that this man did not want to have children, she still moved forward and pursued a relationship that wasn't gonna give her what she wanted. And this is where the vetting process is so important. Like, you need to make sure that you understand your core fundamental things that you need from the person that you're pursuing, and you need to make sure that you answer those questions before you get emotionally involved with them, right? For several reasons. One, you don't end up in a situation like this, but two, you end up not only not wasting your time, but the other person's time, because the minute that more feelings get involved, God forbid, you are stupid and you end up having premarital relationships, now you're making this whole thing an even bigger mess and even tougher for you to decouple with this person that you were getting to know.
So now here again is where I go back to what I said in the beginning, right? Where just because society may do things and it may seem like it's normal does not mean that we should be living the same way if we're looking to pursue Christ, right? Like perfect example right there with that, right? Being on the same page. This is super important. But if you've seen only negative aspects of relationships, you got to work that out with God first, so that way then you can bring forward something good over to somebody else.
What are you getting at? What are you saying exactly?
What I'm just trying to say is that a lot of the bad habits that we've built up in our
because I feel
life,
like you're bringing up this perspective, but I think you're thinking about something that I'm not quite getting.
Well, I'm
like,
thinking,
what are you thinking about that?
Well, I think about that because of different people that I've dealt with in my own personal life, people I've dated before and stuff like that. And it's there seems to always be like this constant, because sin is in the world and sin has really just damaged things, right? Like, it's normal to, well, I put it to you like this. I remember when I first proposed to my wife and I told a bunch of my friends I was going to marry her. The first thing that everybody said was, oh, well, you need to live with her first so you can see and make sure that she's the right one, because if you don't live with her and, you marry her, then it's impossible to break out. Like, a lot of people had these really twisted and messed up views from their own personal experiences that they would then share on to others. So what you're seeing is just a vicious cycle of how relationships should, quote unquote, be done. But what comes out of that? Usually kids out of wedlock. Usually you'll develop a relationship with somebody for years, maybe even have a child with them, but then never get married. There builds up a fear of commitment.
But from your perspective, like now. You personally, you're saying, like, did your personal, whatever, trauma or baggage affect the decision that you made to marry your wife?
Yeah, absolutely, but in a positive way. Right? Like, I mean, I'll go into a little bit of my testimony, but as a kid...
Careful.
Listen, simmer down. Simmer down, because you know what? Christ has done the work in between both parties, completely different people, right? So, if anything, this testimony is here to tell you guys that if you're going through a hard time, if you're going through a struggle, right, God can still do the change. My parents had the worst marriage when I was a kid. Constantly seeing them fighting with each other. Just really, really like ugly stuff that, a kid at the age of, 6, 7, growing up all the way into his teenage years shouldn't have seen. But God, right? So me seeing a lot of that negativity kind of put me into a mindset of, well, I'm not going to treat my wife this way. I need to be better. And so at least that had a positive effect on me, but that's also through God's grace. What do we say to the person that maybe doesn't have a strong relationship with God and they're trying to figure out what is going on, but society has shown them something else?
Go find Jesus.
Absolutely. But here's the thing, though, right? Like, I think it's important to recognize that we're all going through it at different points in our path.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes we're just in the thick of it. I've heard of Christians that neither of them were believers. They both, started believing in God, but they were living with each other, and then, they just got thrown into marriage. So I think it's important to recognize that everybody is at a different point. But that is the first focal point that needs to be found. Find Jesus, and then from there also see what's going on in your life and see what the Word is giving you to then alter what you believe is normal to be aligned with the Bible.
So I think that the application sometimes is it's harder than the answer, and
100%.
Like, forgive me if if I come off like a little crude, but it's just like sometimes we make what is that saying? I don't know. We make something bigger than what it needs to be.
We drown in a cup of water.
Right? Yeah, we drown it in a cup of water, and the thing is, like, if you come with me with a problem, I'm gonna tell you what the solution is. I'm not gonna tell you that it's gonna be easy for you to do it, but I think that the solution itself is simple. For somebody like that, like the first step, like let's say I'm the friend that's seeing what's happening, is like I need to show you Jesus, pray for you, and make sure that you come to Christ so that we can then start addressing the other issues. Like I can't go in, give your Christly perspective, and expect that you're gonna listen to me because you're not, right? The first step would be Jesus, and I'll give you guys a specific example. Like there's a friend that I know that. I won't get into all the details, but he was living with a woman. It's a mixed family, there's a bunch of stuff going on. They were not married, right? And me being who I am, right? Like I've started to get to know this man. He seems to be serious about God, and we were developing this relationship. And I kid you not, we're in his house. He invites us for dinner. We have a great time, and then on the side we're talking. Because I split up to my side. You know how you do. The wife goes to their side, and they start talking. And then at one point, ignorance or not, I go to him like, look, man, like, you know what God would want you to do, like. You can't be living like this. You got to get married. Like, what are you doing? And I kid you not, I probably knew him for like a month at this time. And I think, it was God's grace. But, later on, obviously, after they got married and everything like this, a few years later, he's like, man, like the one day we were out to dinner. He's like, the one day you called me out on it, that's when I really started focusing on preaching to my girlfriend at the time and making sure that she got to know Christ, and thank God she did, and we got married. But that was because you called me out on it. And like for me, it's like sometimes you have to be able to not put all of these buts and all of these dramas and all this, and I mean all of the traumas and all these things. Like tell people the simple answer. Tell them it's not going to be easy necessarily to follow it, but the Bible has a lot of clear answers to a lot of these questions that we have in life. But we do have some questions here. Do you want to go through them?
Yeah. So